Hello, it's Willow here. I am an astrologer and most of my videos are astrological, but today I'm going to talk about a subject that is non-astrological, though I may weave some astrology into it. And the reason I'm making this video is that there are a number of videos on YouTube about this subject, but none that I felt represented my experience. So I'm here to talk about my experience and just to share some insights on this subject. And the subject I am going to talk about is dating someone with Asperger Syndrome. So this may be of interest to other people who are dating people with Asperger Syndrome. It may be of interest to people with Asperger Syndrome, or it may be, just generally of interest to a handful of people. But basically, the scenario with dating someone with Asperger's is that it makes interpersonal relationships quite difficult a lot of the times. And so, okay, I'm not an expert in Asperger's at all, okay? I only really delved into it recently when I was dating someone that I suspected had Asperger syndrome. So it's a general sort of phenomenon that someone with Asperger's and someone without Asperger's coming into a relationship will have some issues, okay? And so this video is basically airing some of those issues, just so that people don't feel like they're alone. People can identify what's going on, and hopefully, make some progress on these issues. So one of the major, so Asperger syndrome is a form of autism. And autism, as most people know, one of the most marked characteristics of autism is being in their own little world, okay? So people who are autistic are sort of in their own little world. They do their own thing. They're often not keen on physical touch and physical affection. They're often not able to have a reciprocal conversation, back and forth conversation. They're often not able to take an interest in the people around them, okay? So Asperger's has some of those characteristics, definitely. Again, it's an offshoot of autism, or it's considered an offshoot of autism. And so what I found dating someone with Asperger's was that, yes, it's very difficult to have a fully reciprocal relationship with someone with Asperger's. And this is something that would have to be worked on, again, with the two individuals involved. So when I started dating this gentleman, I was not aware that he had Asperger's. And he has never been formally diagnosed with Asperger's, but he brought it up to me. So we were actually watching the show Community on Netflix, and one of the characters on Community has Asperger syndrome, and one of his special interests, and I'll talk about the special interest, is television. And so the guy that I'm dating also has a strong, like, you could maybe even say obsession with television. And so as we're watching this show, he says to me, I sort of thought that I may have Asperger's because, I have some, because I love television that much too. So, I just kind of laughed it off for a second, but then I thought, you know what? this needs some investigation. We need to look into this here, okay? Because again, I was having a lot of issues with this relationship, and I didn't understand why. Because this man that I was dating was brilliant, very hilarious, funny guy, very charming, very generous, very, for the most part, very caring as well. So just a very lovely person he was, and is. We are no longer dating, but he's still a lovely person. We're just not dating. But there were these glaring issues that were coming up between the two of us. And one of the primary ones was literally just that he didn't take any interest in me as a person. So, we dated for 5 months. So it was like the whole time it was sort of the early stages of the relationship, right? And I realized that, I had asked him about his background, what he'd been doing up until now, his previous jobs, his previous relationships, his university education, his friends, his family. You know, I had delved into all of these topics with him, and I realized that there was nothing coming the other way. He seemed perfectly content to just, you know, have me in his life without sort of delving into who I was as a person or what I'd been doing with myself or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm a Libra sun, right? And so I'm actually pretty used to, and this is some of the astrology, that I'm actually pretty used to people not treating me like a full individual, right? Because Libra sun, a Libra sun is in detriment. So a Libra sun very often is about being there for other people, right? Being a support for other people, being a platform for other people, being a sounding board for other people, right? Libra is a relationship planet. So I was sort of used to this, but this particular relationship took it to an absolute extreme, okay? I realized, so I spent many, many nights at his home, had many, many meals with him, but I realized it was all me going to him and me fitting into his world. And whenever I would ask him to come into my world or even to meet my family or anything, he was instantly stressed and he would usually bail. He would bail on it, which is terrible. Absolutely terrible. So, you know, I mean, these are in the early stages of a relationship, all of this is sort of a potential for a breakup, right? Because it's like, well, who is this? This guy's an asshole. He doesn't care about who I am. He doesn't care about my background. He doesn't care about my work. He doesn't care about anything. He won't meet my family. He won't even come over to my house. He definitely won't stay over at my house, you know? So it was a mystery as far as why is this guy acting like this? He wouldn't put much effort into maintaining contact either. Okay, so this goes back to, again, the being in your own little world. So people with Asperger's, a lot of people with Asperger's literally are fine being by themselves. Okay, and so that's great, right? Wonderful. That's a great. I enjoy being by myself too. I enjoy having my alone time. I enjoy being an independent woman. So this, again, right off the bat, this didn't really hit me as being weird or abnormal or anything like that. But again, it's taken to an extreme, right? So literally, if I didn't call him, if I didn't sort of get the ball rolling, if I didn't maintain contact with him, I could not hear from him for like weeks on end, really, you know? That's sort of how it went. And again, it was just a bit weird, okay? Another thing that would happen was monologues. Okay, so people with Asperger's have what they refer to as special interests, okay? And so special interests relate to something that they are, I would say, obsessed with, okay? So they spend a whole lot of time learning everything there is to know about a special interest, okay? And so in the case of this guy, it was television and music. And to a certain extent, I would say cats. And maybe history as well. The primary was music. The music and television probably were the primary. And then maybe the secondary special interests were cats and history. So, you know, this is an intelligent guy. You know, I like talking to him. I like hearing what he has to say. But, again, it gets taken to an extreme. So at this, you know, so you're sitting at the kitchen table with the guy, and he will literally go on for 2 hours straight. He would go on for probably the whole night on television. Okay, so he'll just go from show to show, to actor, and just talk television the whole time, right? Simpsons was a huge thing. So constant Simpsons references, constant trivia about Simpsons, and literally, you know, he would have the floor if I would let him, right, for hours. He would talk about it for hours, and it was very difficult for me to switch gears with him, for me to get him onto a different topic, or to, you know, maybe let me talk for a little while, something like that, right? And then again, it comes up that this is an Asperger's thing, right? So this guy isn't just a lout, you know, he's not just loving hearing himself talk, right? And not caring about the person he's with. It's literally a trait of Asperger's that they kind of get this one-track mind, and if they're talking about something that they love so much as a special interest, they can just go on and on and on. And if they find someone who has a receptive ear, they will take advantage of that, believe me. Again, this is behavior that's going to the extreme, right? The monologues, one of the things with Asperger's people is that they cannot, it's hard for them to pick up on social cues, and it's also hard for them to pick up on facial expression in another person. So I would be sitting there, you know, and after, you know, the first hour, my eyes would just glaze right over, right? But again, I'm a Libra sun, so at the beginning stages of our relationship, I was too polite to really, I would try to interject here and there and take an interest, but I was too polite to say, you know, I just don't care that much about television, or I just don't care that much about music. You know, I'm just not involved in this conversation. So, you know, basically, after the first hour, my eyes would be glazed over, my face would be just like stony bored, you know. But again, because he has Asperger syndrome, he was not picking up on this. He was not picking up on these clues, you know, that it was time to shift the conversation. Asperger's people generally love their routines, okay? So they do not like anything. It follows with the idea that, you know, he spent no time in my world, right? Because he wants to only be in his world. And so it's like a female could come and sort of participate in his world, but when it was time for him to come out and participate in my world, he wouldn't or couldn't do it, right? I would say wouldn't, but I guess some people would say couldn't. So basically that would be another issue, right? If someone, especially if someone's been a bachelor for a very long time, right? Or a bachelorette, right? So you get in this single world, right? This is the way you do things. And then there's another person there, but you don't alter the way that you do things at all, right? So again, there's a major lack of reciprocity there. And if a person with Asperger's routine is disrupted, even in small ways, it often can throw them off in a big way, okay? So they will be irritated, they will be angry, they will be confused, you know, kind of confused and chaotic, just because something is different in their routine, okay? And the other thing about people with Asperger's is a lot, or I don't know if a lot of them, but one of the characteristics also is meltdowns, okay? So yelling and temper tantrums and that kind of thing. Again, mostly when something happened that was not expected or planned, right? Or loud noises. That's another thing that really gets on the nerves of a lot of people with Asperger's because of their sensitivity level. Is so if the smoke alarm went off, that would create you know, a temper tantrum, like a temper flare. Again, if any small thing happened, there would be this what most people would see as an overreaction to a fairly small event. Like, okay, the smoke detector is going off. Well, fan it with a tea towel, open the door, and case, you know, problem solved, right? But when it's sensory overload, that's another, you know, issue with Asperger's is sensory overload, right? Again, anything outside the routine can be a sensory overload. Any type of social interaction that isn't sort of carefully controlled, right? And in a carefully controlled environment can be sensory overload as well. The other thing with people with Asperger's, and this is really difficult, especially in a new relationship, is the lack of physical affection. So people with Asperger's, again, because they're sort of so self-contained and kind of in their own little worlds, they don't necessarily spontaneously give affection or compliments, I found. And also when you give them affection, there's sort of a 50-50 chance that they're not going to like it all that much. And so that gets a little bit hard on a person because, when you're newly dating someone, you want to feel that, they want to be around you, they're attracted to you, they want to be touched by you, they want to be close to you, right? And again, with somebody with Asperger's, you're not necessarily going to get that, okay? That's also, a huge issue with autistic children, right? Because their parents want to love them and cuddle them and hug them and kiss them, but the autistic child is not necessarily conducive to that, okay? So lack of physical affection, lack of spontaneous physical affection, doesn't necessarily love when you give physical affection, and doesn't necessarily give spontaneous compliments or anything that the person with Asperger's would consider frivolous, right? And unfortunately, when you're in a new relationship, you need a little bit of those you need a few of those frivolous compliments, you need a few of those frivolous date nights, you need a few of those frivolous hugs and kisses, right? So that you're creating a bond there, right? So the other thing, the other thing about people with Asperger's, and this again goes to kind of the emotional component, is that they can be extremely rude. Okay, they can be extremely rude. They can be extremely indifferent to how you feel or what you think or how their behavior even affects you. Right. So again, they have a really hard time taking in another person as a full individual and understanding that if they're in a relationship, what they do or say affects the other person and vice versa, right? So one of the things with Asperger's is inability to show emotion, right? And I'm not sure if they don't feel emotions. I'm sure they do feel emotions, right? But there's some type of a different way of processing them so that they aren't necessarily able to communicate about their emotions or show them spontaneously again, right? And this is, this is difficult because, again, most people don't want to date someone who's rude. Most people don't want to date an asshole or a bitch. Most people don't want to date someone who could care less about the way that they feel. Couldn't care less, sorry. Most people don't want to date someone who is indifferent to whether they're even around or not. Okay? And if you're dating someone with Asperger's, that's something you have to wrap your head around. That this person may actually prefer to be alone than, to be with you. And so you have to work out, just how far, just where that level is as far as them wanting to be around you. But the emotional difficulty with dating someone with Asperger's was severe for me, okay? Because I'm an astrologer for a living, and so I'm a very emotional and intuitive person. And I'm not saying all astrologers are, but most astrologers have some emotional depth and some emotional insight, right, into the workings of human beings and the workings of human relationships. That's why people come to us, right? So I'm a person who lives in the emotional realms and uses those emotional realms as cues as far as what I'm supposed to do, what I'm supposed to be doing, right? So when you're with someone who has no problem sort of being what I would classify as rude, indifferent, almost to a certain point, even like almost catatonic, like really almost blocking you out, right? That's sort of a trait of Asperger's. Because again, having another person around can be overwhelming to them, right? It's like sensory overload, overstimulation, right? And so there is a balance there that you can meet. But again, when you're in the early stages of a relationship, it's really tricky because none of those usual social or romantic indicators are really there. You're kind of flying blind. And then on top of that, you're getting all this behavior that you don't understand, and all this behavior that in another situation would be considered completely unacceptable, right? To continue with. So let's just say, it's not easy. One of the problems, and I know I'm probably going to get heat from this, but one of the problems, I've done some research listening to people with Asperger's, and one of the issues I think is that, and I think this kind of goes along with sort of that new age tendency to create these like superhumans, super spiritual or whatever people, right? Super evolved people. So there's a little bit of a tendency for people with Asperger's to feel like they're superhuman, right? And to feel like I've just evolved past being emotional, and you guys are just, peons, and you're just way back in there, which is really not the way that I see things. Because I don't think that being emotionally sophisticated, emotionally aware, emotionally intuitive, emotionally insightful, I don't think those are unevolved traits, let's say. Okay? So there's a little bit of this superhero tendency, right? Where the person with Asperger's feels that they're in the right completely, and that everyone else in the world just needs to be more like me, and then the problem would be solved, right? and the guy that I dated had a little bit of that for sure. Basically, it was my problem. They were my problems, right? With him, he wasn't having any problems. So mostly because I made it too easy on him. But the scenario there is that if you're a deeply emotional person, this behavior is going to be really hurtful to you, especially if you're not aware that these are common Asperger's traits, right? And especially if you're not aware that the person you're dating even has Asperger's, okay? Because again, I wasn't aware of that at the beginning, but then I started as soon as he mentioned it, I started putting two and two together. I started doing some research on the internet, and I was like, wow, this is exactly it. These are exactly the relationship problems that we're running into. These are exactly the behaviors, it's textbook. It's absolutely textbook. And so that gives you a certain amount of help, right? Because at least you're like, okay, well, this is a real thing. This is a phenomenon. This is a situation. And, hopefully we can work with it. But, I was actually told by this man, I hate emotional people. I hate emotional people. Because basically he felt that emotion was illogical, right? And that's not my experience. My experience is that my emotions are very logical, right? I may not know exactly what they're telling me until I delve into it, right? I may not know exactly what my emotions are telling me in the moment that I'm feeling it. But if I delve into that, there's almost always a strong logic to what I'm feeling, right? So one of the things that I came across in my research was that it's fairly common, and this is sort of a yin-yang, opposites attract sort of thing going on. It's fairly common for someone with Asperger's to get together with someone who is very emotional and passionate person, okay, and a very sort of sensitive, emotional, passionate person, and that's definitely this situation in a nutshell, right? So again, you have those opposites attracting. You have the person who hates emotional people, thinks it's irrational, and has no problem being straight out rude to people when it suits his fancy, right? And then you have a person who is living primarily in the emotional realms and using the emotional realms to navigate. So, needless to say, this caused some problems. The person with Asperger's will have very difficult time putting him or herself in your shoes. That's what I've found. Again, that comes with the lack of reciprocity, the self-contained nature, the self-focus, the self-absorption even, right? Basically, this causes things to break down. So my relationship did break down with this individual, and it's unfortunate because I do think that progress could have been made. I do think that things could have been worked out in a way to at least give it a fighting chance, right? To at least see, because we really enjoyed each other, we really liked each other, we really liked spending time together, but we were running into these issues all the time, right? These Asperger's related issues. And one of the main issues was that he didn't live as if he did have Asperger's. So he just kind of flippantly said, oh, I kind of wondered if I had Asperger's at one point. But he didn't live as if that was a reality, right? And the reality is that people with Asperger syndrome will often run into these problems, and their relationships will break down often for these problems, right? So the overall message, I think, of that, well, I mean, I don't know if I really have a message about this, right? I basically just wanted to bring this stuff up, so that other people who were in a similar situation could just know that they are not crazy and are not alone, and maybe have some jumping off points to work with. But the overall message really is that I think relationships between Asperger's and non-Asperger's do have the potential to work if there's compatibility in other arenas, right? And strong compatibility, a strong like and strong respect for each other. But you have to work with it as if it's a real thing, okay? So you have to work with the syndrome as if it's real, and as if these issues are real and they're really happening, right? And so unfortunately, the indifference towards me and the disregard I feel for me as a person and for my emotions reached a breaking point. At the same time as he was starting a new job that was very demanding. So basically, what happened was that he chose to end the relationship instead of trying to work things out, because I think he was just overwhelmed, right? And so he decided that he would rather not have a relationship. And that's another issue with Asperger's people, is that often, because they're so sort of self-absorbed and self-contained, they don't necessarily see the value in a relationship. Okay, so this guy was always sort of teetering on, do I want to bother putting effort into this when it may not pay off, or do I want to just be on my own, right? And so there was always this kind of one foot in, one foot out tendency with this particular man. And basically the relationship couldn't withstand that, right? So I think that if two people are committed to trying to work things out, to staying together and trying to sort of bring insight to these issues and to try to work out the right compromise, the right balance, so that both people are having their needs met. Okay, if people are willing to do that, I think that there is a chance. And I think that these can be really productive relationships, whether or not it's your, true love, lifelong mate kind of scenario, or whether it's somebody that you can have a long-term boyfriend-girlfriend relationship with, or whether it's somebody that you're just going to date short-term, which is what it turned out with me. So I think that there is potential there, but I think both people have to be ready and willing, right? And they have to be able to be adults about it, and they have to be able to be honest about how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and you have to have that degree of like intimate communication. And if that isn't there in a relationship, I don't think there is a chance. Okay. So the overall feel is it's up to you, but I think that it would definitely help to treat the Asperger syndrome as if it's a real thing, a real potential issue in the relationship, and to break it down into these Asperger's traits that are causing issues, and to then come up with solutions as a couple. The other problem, though, is that if you are an emotionally sensitive and passionate person, being with someone who doesn't take an interest in you, doesn't take much of an interest in you as a person, doesn't take much of an interest in your background or your family or your friends, being with someone who finds it difficult, if not impossible, to participate fully in your world, being with someone who doesn't show you affection and who is, kind of weirded out and creeped out some of the times when you show them affection. Someone who, doesn't spontaneously give you compliments. Someone who doesn't sort of have a romantic bone in his body, right? So again, with Asperger's, the idea of romance is often superfluous, right? So, why would you need that? That's just silly human frailty and weakness, that kind of thing. Being with someone who is rude and abrupt and has meltdowns and all of that kind of stuff, this can really cause some emotional damage, okay? And it can also cause damage to your self-esteem because, you know, and I'm not saying that this is the way that it should be or the way that this is an evolved way to be, but this is what happens, right? Is that when you aren't getting that reciprocity from the person you're with, but you're putting it out there, you're putting energy and time into that person and into that person's life and into the relationship, but you're not getting it back, that can be a really detrimental position to put yourself in. So I would say my advice is don't stick with this relationship at all costs, okay? If you're getting trampled and shredded and the person is not willing to work it out with you, it's probably time to end that relationship, okay? We're now shifting astrological eras, okay? We're moving from the astrological Piscean era to the astrological Aquarian era. And under the astrological Piscean era, the major ethic was love solves everything. All we need is love, right? Okay, well, you know, ultimately, I believe that's true. Ultimately, we are love. We come from love. We will return to love, okay? So no matter what happens on this planet, and there's a lot of crappy stuff happening on this planet, ultimately, love does prevail. I believe that 100%. But that's kind of the macro view, okay? We are now shifting into the astrological Aquarian era, and the reality is love does not necessarily conquer everything, okay? You do need more than just love in order to make an interpersonal relationship work these days under the stresses that it is under these days, okay? So again, and I know it's a different scenario if you are married to someone with Asperger's and have children with someone with Asperger's, you know, but ultimately you have to make the call, right? And so if the person with Asperger's is willing to see things from your perspective to even a slightly stronger degree than they currently are, then there may be something to work with. But if the person with Asperger's is fully set in their ways, and a lot of people with Asperger's, as I've learned in my research, are, it may not make you happy over the long term. It may not fulfill you over the long term, and it may not meet your needs over the long term. So basically, the scenario is that we need more than just love and sort of affection for each other. We need compatibility on a sort of day-to-day basis. And that's really, I think, where the nuts and bolts of making these types of relationships work lies. Sorry, that was not said very gracefully, but the day-to-day compatibility, the day-to-day working it out, kind of staying on the same page emotionally, right? Staying on the same track as far as what your relationship needs, what the next step is, how can we improve this? How can we make this strong over the course of time? So anyway, that's my experience from dating someone with Asperger's, and I hope that it's maybe helpful or to someone, or that someone may feel that they are not alone in dealing with the situation. Again, my relationship unfortunately broke down under the stresses of these the undiagnosed Asperger's and just the issues that it came with it. But in hindsight, hindsight's 2020. So in hindsight, I see what was causing the problems. I see the pressure that it was creating on him, right, to have to welcome someone else into his world, and to then, not only that, but to then have to come out of his little bubble world and enter into someone else's world at the same time that, again, the job stresses were going on. So I see basically the way that I was confused in the moment, the way that I was hurt in the moment, and the way that I reacted in the moment that was not helpful to the situation, right? But ultimately, I do think that people with Asperger's have to make an effort, right? They have to make an effort to make things better, on the social and romantic and intimacy front, okay? And if they're not willing to do that, then they probably shouldn't date anyone, okay? Because that's what it's going to require to take it to the next level.